Cool. Well, happy Monday, Chris.
Happy Monday.
I call this the Home for Humanity podcast because I got into the housing world and am now obsessed with what home is, kind of through a naturalist, nature connection, survivalist pathway. So, yeah, let's just start with what organization do you work for, and that kind of how is like survival skills connected to home.
Sure,
Let's start there.
sure. So my name is Chris Collier. I'm the program manager for the Alliance for Housing Affordability, which is a fancy name for an interlocal agreement between all of the cities of Snohomish County. They got together back in 2013 and said, we should all probably know something about housing. We don't. And so they decided that they would. They all pay funds annually into the Housing Authority of Snohomish County, who is my employer. I'm technically a Housing Authority employee, but my one and only job is to serve the cities that need help with understanding why housing do the way it does. And so that's my job. I work inside the Housing Authority. I get to look at how a housing authority works from the inside out, and appreciate and understand all of that nuance. But also my main job and focus is helping the cities understand and do anything they need related to housing. If housing touches it, it is within my scope to try to understand it and help the cities understand it. And if they feel that there's an issue, or that there's something that they want to do to respond, then it's my job to be there to help them. So I'm there as a tool for the cities to use, not as someone to go and tell the cities, like, you have to do this, you're behind on that, you need to do this, kind of rapping their knuckles with a ruler and saying, shame on you. I'm there to help them in any way they need as it pertains to housing, which, back to survival skills, what happens without a house? What happens without a place to call home or a place to call shelter? Let's get it back to the real basics. Home is about shelter from the elements. It's a place to, sleep safely, so on and so forth. And so what things don't happen, or what things are not impacted by a lack of a place to sleep safely, a lack of protection from the elements, so on and so forth, not very much. And so I tend to cast a very broad net into society on how housing impacts things, which, since I'm an employee or a army of one, that leaves me very little time to do any of those things with great depth. But I'm kind of drawing connections between housing, healthcare, transportation, environment, society, and social stressors, things like that, the workforce, so on and on and on. So that's what I do in a very long explanation. So yeah, so
Awesome.
it's
Thanks.
all things housing. Yeah.
Why are you an army of one? Can you go more into that? Like, there's the housing authority, and then they said we needed someone to do more research on specific how what housing touches, and so you're
Yes.
that
So
person.
the cities needed help writing their comprehensive plans. That's where the kind of, if there's something really crunchy, not, academic and philosophical underneath this, if there's something, the crunchy stuff is, we need someone to help us understand how to write a municipal code that actually gets something done that we want to have done. We want the data to back it up, the analytics to back it up, but at the end of the day, we need something that gives us tangible results. So that's my core job. I've spent most of my time doing you actually do have a problem and you need to do something piece. But the comprehensive plan, which is currently going on right now, Snohomish County cities comprehensive plans are due at the end of 2024. The cities need help with stuff like that. I mean, most cities in Snohomish County have a planning department of 1 or 2 people. The comprehensive plan is hundreds of pages long. The housing element is also dozens of pages long. It's getting longer every time the legislature opens the hood on the Growth Management Act. And so, a department of 1 or 2 people doesn't necessarily have the expertise or the time to do all of those things and to stay up on, okay, what does a racially disparate impacts analysis mean? What does a displacement risk analysis mean? We need someone to help us do that. And so that's where I really started. why am I an army of one? Why am I just one person? That's an excellent question. It's something where really it comes down to tight municipal budgets, and the cities not always being sure if they want to use me versus using a consulting firm, and kind of hemming and hawing between that. So I tend to do kind of specialist work, and the consultants do a lot of the grunt work. If that, I'm not sure if that's a totally accurate way of characterizing it, but it's the best way that I can right now. So, but I hope in the future to not be an army of one, because there is a lot more work to do than one person can reasonably accomplish.
Yeah, totally. I mean, can you list the, well, maybe you don't have to, but like not all of the cities are part of the housing
Yeah,
authority,
not
right?
all, most of. So the alliances cities are, let's see if I can recall them all from name. Arlington, Arlington, Darrington, Edmonds, Everett, Lake Stevens, Linwood, Mukilteo, Mount Lake Terrace, Monroe, Mill Creek, Snohomish, Stanwood, Snohomish County, Woodway. I think that's all of them. If I forgot you, I apologize. Granite Falls, that's the one I always forget, Granite Falls.
Nice.
So the only cities I'm missing are Index, Gold Bar, Sultan, Briar, and that's it. Because Darrington just joined last month, 2 months ago. So,
Cool. Yeah, I like
so hooray
Snohomish
for
County
Darrington.
a lot. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I'm in Duval, and so I've been somewhat involved in, they were putting together this summer the housing piece and taking public opinion, and they have consultants now. And yeah, it was just very interesting how it all works, because it seems to impact so much the way that this planning is all coming together. And I mean, even for like the public hearing that happened here, it was such a little turnout, and it's like, well, do they market enough? Do they want people to know? Do people even want to come? Do they want to be a part of this? And just in
Do
comparison,
people
they were
understand what they're commenting on even?
right. And
So
and yeah, I something I've been, well, can you maybe, I mean, this is just where my mind's going, and I'm like, this is how I like the conversation to evolve. So
sure.
I'm curious, what's the difference that you've seen in the ways that like cities versus, because you said Snohomish County is in there, and so
Yes,
like
Snohomish County's a member.
did they, that's like outside of city limit housing, right? Is there a big difference in the way that those two types of entities approach housing?
Yes, the county. Yes. So it's impossible to describe verbally, but I will encourage people to take the time sometime to go look up a map. Just type into Google or your preferred search engine, Snohomish County Urban Growth Area Map.
Hmm.
And what the first thing that should come up is the County Planning and Development Services map of all city limits and their urban growth areas. And the thing to, and this is a bit of a long course, but we have an hour so
Yeah,
or more.
let's
So
go.
let's go there.
Do it.
So what you'll see is the current city limits of Snohomish County, of Snohomish County cities, and then you'll see little lighter shaded pink areas, which are the urban growth areas where the cities are supposed to expand into over time. But right now, they are, those light pink areas, the urban growth areas, are under the county's control. The county is much more permissive when it comes to zoning and permitting. It's much easier to get something done with the county than the cities. There's a truckload of reasons why, but long story short, the county is much easier to work with. They're much more like, sure, whatever, I don't care, go ahead. And so what you're seeing development pattern wise is a tremendous amount of Snohomish County's growth, like the entire county, including the city areas. A tremendous amount of Snohomish County's growth is going into those unincorporated urban growth areas around the cities. I actually lived in one when I first moved up to Snohomish County. It's just north of 164th on Manor Way, and north of Linwood. It's technically a Linwood address. You get all of kind of the amenities of living in Linwood, but it was county land. And that project happened on the county side of the city line, not the city side. You see the same thing happening in Mukilteo on Beverly Road in Mukilteo. there are developments popping up all up and down the east side of Beverly Road. I think it's east-west. Anyway, on the more easterly side of Beverly Road, because that's the county land, not because on the county side you can get a project done. On the city side, the city says no, for a variety of reasons. First, most prominently of which is zoning. The county zoning is much more permissive, and in their urban growth areas, they tend to be much more, sure, go ahead, laissez-faire zoning. And so you see a tremendous amount of our townhome production happening in those.
Chris, your audio went out.
Oh,
Maybe
no.
it's me.
Can you hear me? Ooh, can you hear me still?
Oh, no, I can't hear you. Hold on.
How am I coming through?
Try again.
Testing, testing. Am I back?
No.
What the heck?
It's weird.
Why no worky? I can hear you just fine.
Testing, testing.
Yep.
You can hear me.
Can you hear me okay? Am I coming through? How about now? No?
That wasn't.
Hey, we're back.
Audio's
I used to be in IT. Audio's working. I got my degree in IT to start with. You'll see why soon enough when I talk more about the work I do. But I got out of IT for a reason, because politics is easier than technology. I once was crawling underneath a guy's desk trying to fix his technology setup. Turns out to be the campus ergonomist, and he sticks his head underneath the desk and he says, "Hey, if you can't turn that 3-foot cord into a 6-foot cord, and I have to lean over to turn on my computer, I'm legally allowed to sue you for physical harm." Like, sucks. I hate this job. I'm gonna go do politics instead.
Oh my God.
So technology's awful is the story, and I hate it. So anyway, as I was saying, I'll recap. I'll back up a little bit.
Okay.
So did you hear Beverly Road?
Yes, in.
Okay. Yeah, so Beverly Road next to Mukilteo, it's east-west, east, like northeasterly. On the Snohomish County side, on the east northeasterly side of Beverly Road, you'll see a truckload of development happening because the county is just much more permissive. So sure, go ahead, why not? And developers know that, and so you're seeing a tremendous amount of development going into what I like to describe. No one else does, but I like to describe it as the donut hole between Linwood, Mukilteo, and Everett. There's this great big chunk of unincorporated urban growth area that is where a lot of our development is going. So I mentioned that by way of saying, how does the county behave? Why is the county a member? The county is very much in control of a lot of urban area in Snohomish County that we don't appreciate as we just drive around or walk around. Because there's no sign, great big blinking sign that says, "You are now entering City of Everett. You are now entering Everett's urban growth area." It's an Everett address, it's an Everett, right? But so the state law established the urban growth boundaries, which you will also see on this map. That I suggest you go look at, and that's really where all our growth needs to go. Growth in Snohomish County really needs to go inside that urban growth boundary. And ideally, it should be the cities that are taking it on. Practically speaking, the cities aren't. And there's a lot of reasons why that I don't want to totally sidetrack us with yet. I'm sure we'll get there. But so what is the county doing? How does the county behave differently than cities? The county is a little closer to the Growth Management Act and a little further away from people being super mad about things changing in their neighborhood. County land tends to be much. Well, let's see. How do I phrase this? Basically, it's easier for the county to change zoning because there's less concept of community and people get less upset. The county is just more permissive and they have a more progressive, I guess, or more responsive to state requirements zoning map than the cities have tended to have. Because the county, really feels that they have to, I think. Not to say the county's perfect, don't get me wrong, but the county tends to be the place where a lot of our last decade of growth is happening, is in that urban growth area donut hole between the cities. So, why are they a member? Both to keep tabs on what the cities are doing,
but also because, they need as much help as everybody else in, understanding what the county is much larger, but still, when you go to planning school, this is something I've been talking about recently with a couple of folks in the American Planning Association. Washington is, when you go to planning school, you don't really go to school to understand like residential development finance, right? Like, how does a project get built? What's the funding stack look like? What makes a project pencil? What, how much does tuck under parking, structured parking, impact a project's cost? You don't really go to school for that. That's what architects are for. That's what builders are for. And so there's this kind of gap. This is back to why does the Alliance exist? There's this knowledge gap between cities nationwide, I think, and the development community nationwide, where the two both look at the other and say, well, it's so simple, just, F and do it. And the other one says, well, no, it's not. It's really, really hard. And, no one's really thought to try to bridge the gap. And that's something that I try to do as the Alliance, is try to bridge the gap so the cities understand, oh, that's why it didn't work. Okay. And then the building community understands, oh, hey, the lights went out. Turn on lights. I'll turn them on in a second. There we go. Wow, I'm bright. Maybe this video isn't going to come out, so the listeners don't know anything about what's happening.
Oh, it will. It'll be
both sides. Excellent. Have that be the thumbnail. It's just washed out crisp. Part of the angels saying. Both sides are looking at each other saying, like, well, why is this so hard? And the Alliance, part of the Alliance's job is to bridge that gap. So anyway, I think that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you say like even counties or the county can be more compliant to some of the state things, and I guess that makes sense because where else is the growth going, right? But there is this I don't know, and maybe it just is from my ignorance because I haven't been in this field, in this industry for very long. But like that the cities are wanting more density, so they're the ones doing what they can to wiggle in more density, but actually it's the counties that are trying to be like, well, hey, this is where the people are, this is where new growth is actually happening. It's a little bit harder, I guess, in the cities right now.
I've heard it described to me, and I'm not sure how accurate this is, so take this with a grain of salt, that basically if the cities ignore or miss on their growth targets, the county's the one left holding the bag. And so the cities are like, oops, we missed. Coincidentally, who could have predicted that this, our growth didn't happen here? The county's the place for that growth.
Audio went out again.
All right, let's see. Am I back?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just doing this without headphones. I'm sorry, that was me. Technology is the devil.
It really is.
And I'm not just talking about social media, but mostly social media. Anyway, so the cities, at least in Snohomish County, by and large, have, I hesitate to say that that the residents would say, no, we shouldn't have affordable housing. Most people probably won't say housing being affordable, shelter being attainable is a bad thing. But they keep saying, but don't put it here. I don't want my neighborhood to be impacted. And so I've heard, so here's an anecdote. I heard in one city, I'm not going to name names yet. One city in Southwest Snohomish County said, well, but if people can't live here, we shouldn't have to accommodate every single person that wants to live in city. Some people, most people that can't live here should go further north. They should go to Arlington, they said. And this is where I'll name names. Coincidentally, a former, now past council member, Mike Hobson of Arlington, was talking to me a couple weeks later, and he said, not knowing what I had just what I'd heard a few weeks ago, said, but Chris, my council says, well, if people can't afford to live here, they should just move further north. I'm like, you guys, we're all passing the buck further north and not recognizing that we, as a system of cities, of municipalities, are creating the problem. Even if individually we feel like, well, but I can't solve the problem, we're creating this system that is larger than any one city. And the problem is we're just telling people to move further north, and that is indeed happening. And I can talk about that more later. But as cities say, well, yes, of course we should have affordable housing, just somewhere else. And the next city up says, well, not here. I mean, we're just as beatific and bucolic and perfect and utopian as the next city down I-5. So they should move even further north. Even further north should be impacted. I hope I don't need to belabor the point any further to show how this is a problem. This could evolve into something where it's a total system breakdown of our housing affordability.
Can you go into why, or I mean, like, diversity of housing is one aspect of affordability. And I remember in your like dollars and cents presentation saying something about like townhouses being helpful for cities for tax purposes, but I didn't totally understand.
Yeah.
And maybe it's my own, like, I don't know if townhouses everywhere are entirely the solution, but it does provide
definitely not.
housing that people can purchase, and ownership is a huge thing that's missing in the housing market, like access to ownership. And so renters are just forced to keep paying more rent, So yeah, can you go break into the diversity and how that benefits cities versus?
So how it benefits cities, well, actually, it doesn't really benefit cities. It actually benefits the taxpayers. So that's something that, as we talk about taxation, just a quick sidebar, quick preface to this is the way Washington state taxes work is that the taxing district, whether it's a city, fire district, hospital district, regional transit authority, library, whoever, they set their budget. Whatever that budget is, they set the budget, and then the county assessor decides, okay, this is how in that taxing area that you have jurisdiction over, this is how much the rate per assessed value that you have to pay in taxes. And so the fewer people that we have in that context where we say, here's the budget, divided up equitably between the parcels. The more parcels, the more taxpayers you have, the less tax every individual parcel is going to pay. Is that track enough?
Yeah.
It's like, think about, I hate to describe taxes as a burden because taxes are very valuable. They provide essential services that we all need and appreciate, whether we know it or not. But so let's imagine taxes as a boulder that you're carrying. If you're just by yourself, you're going to get squashed. The boulder's weight doesn't change, just the number of people carrying it is going to change. So if you turn one unit so where I used to live, just north of Linwood, as I mentioned earlier, it used to have one home on it. Then it turned into about 20 townhomes. That lowered the countywide tax burden by some amount. I never went back and calculated that specifically. But I know that if you take a single house in the city of Snohomish, this is the example I have handy. It's a single house, the actual improvement's worth like $30,000, the dirt underneath it's worth like $400,000. And you replaced it with two condos, duplex condos that I found in Monroe. Just pick up those two condos from Monroe and plop them down, same assessed value and everything in Snohomish. The average tax burden, because now you have two units of a higher assessed value, paying higher tax per square foot per acre in Snohomish, the average taxpayer's tax bill in Snohomish would go down by 50 cents a year in the city of Snohomish because you have two parcels paying tax where you used to have one, and you have a higher assessed value because those two new improvements are much higher valued than the old one. And so they pay a higher tax. And so diversity of housing not only brings the social benefits of, hey, I can now afford this townhome that costs like $450,000 to $500,000 instead of a single family home that costs, $600,000 to $700,000. Actually, in Snohomish, that price is around $800,000 today. Not only do you get those social benefits of people being able to attain housing, you also get the immediate, like truly next year tax benefits on existing homeowners. So it's not all give I would encourage people not to think about housing as all give from the current resident perspective. You're getting something as you bring or allow more people to live in your community. if what you get is a lower tax bill, I mean, for the amount that I hear people complaining about their taxes, you'd think that that would be a real winner for people. Hooray, our tax bill is going to go down. It'll go down next year. Now, 50 cents isn't a whole lot, but that's with just a single parcel, one single family house turning into two attached duplex condos. 50 cents. So let's multiply that by a couple, like, 20, 30 units, 20, 30 parcels, and then you start noticing a couple dollars coming off of your taxes. And by the way, a big driver in the tax bill from the tax or the budget increase from the taxing authority is reflective of the cost of living, right? The huge driver of cost is what you have to pay your staff. Every business that can automate its way out of having staff is doing so because people are expensive, right? But we're probably not going to automate our way out of having firefighters or doctors or, librarians, I hope. But they all need to make a living wage. And so as they need to make more to afford the cost of living, that's reflected in the budget that turns into your tax bill. And so if the cost of living goes down because we have adequate housing, then your tax bill's coming down again, or maybe not going up as much. So, you're really working at both ends of the problem, in addition to getting a lot of other benefits. So I think as wonky as looking at taxation is, it's also this most direct gateway into why is housing good? Because you pay less in taxes, you pay extra less in taxes if you have enough housing to bring cost of living down or hold it steady instead of increasing. And you get all sorts of other benefits in addition to having, affordable housing for your librarians, your teachers, your firefighters, your so on and so forth. They're also your neighbors. And this is something I'm trying to tee you up for a segue here. Right now, your firefighter cannot be your neighbor. A general dentist cannot be your neighbor. Not that your tax bill goes to paying your dentist, but a dentist can't even be your neighbor right now. Because the profession of general dentistry, I decided to just take the segue and run with it. I guess if I take a segue and I can't run with it, I just ride away with the segue. Anyway,
I'll follow you. Go there. Go for it.
Okay, follow me on your own segue.
This is an interesting point.
It's your dentist can't be your neighbor anymore because the profession of general dentistry in the Central Puget Sound region, that's Snohomish, King, and Pierce County all together, the profession pays from the 25th percentile, that's like beginning occupation income, to 75th percentile wage is kind of end of career heading into retirement income, $100,000 to $160,000 a year. In the middle of your career as a general dentist, you'll be making about $150,000, which is less than you need to purchase the median single family detached house in Snohomish County. Your dentist making $150,000 a year in the middle of their career, which is, in their late 30s, their early mid 40s, isn't able to buy a house to be your neighbor. Think about all the professions that make less than that. That includes lawyers, it includes judges and magistrates, it includes accountants, it includes nurses, certified nursing assistants, RNs, it just all sorts of occupations. There's over 400 that are caught in that makes below $150,000 a year mark. We're not talking about baristas and grocery store clerks, even though those are excellent neighbors too, and good people that we need in our communities that do excellent necessary jobs, as the pandemic taught us. We're talking about really high paying, high flight occupations that are no longer able to be our neighbors. And so, along the way to try and bring this long wander back to where I started, in addition to all of that, you also get to pay less in taxes, in addition to having those professions as your neighbor. Hooray! And so something I typically conclude with is, and this is more for the end of the discussion, but I set it up nicely, so I'm going to do it now. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to prevent those occupations from living next to us? Is it worth it to pay higher taxes? Is it worth it to incur all of these negatives, which I'll happily explore in more detail as we go? Is it worth that, bearing that burden in exchange for the building doesn't change?
Well,
I mean, that's all we're doing. That's all we're getting is building doesn't change. the people inside it change quite often. In the case of Snohomish, since I've really put this poor city under the microscope lately, the median year for owners to have moved in the city of Snohomish, and this is old data, it's probably changed by now, but the median year that people moved in is 2011. Half, so let me say that again, or say it in a different way. Half of the city of Snohomish's owners, not renters, but owners, have moved in on or after the year 2011. So the city itself is extremely old. Half of the buildings, a little less than half of the buildings, were built before 1939. But most of the people showed up in the last 10 years. So we've preserved the buildings, but we're making sure that the people keep cycling through. And so what really, is it worth it to just protect the buildings, not the people? As we say, well, but our community, neighborhood character, are we really talking about the people or the buildings? And, if we get down to brass tacks, let's think about what we're really saying. Sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh no, I'm just wondering from a real estate perspective, like what are the pros and cons to that? And like I don't want to get cynical, but it's like that's a really easy way to just to have really hard control over the market price. And so many people I hear now in like the affordable housing movement, because it's like the crisis, right? And so the little stickers that I get at like City Hall that can't relate to market rate because of it, like that's a part of that is that, well, if you can just get new people to buy and sell, and just every once in a while that price goes up because the inventory around you isn't changing. That's way more control over price and people. And the people moving in, they're gonna, being in downtown Snohomish, seeing the little houses that are going up, I'm like, people are gonna like that. I think they're gonna like that the character change, especially if it's new people coming in that, want to see
And
it.
it's, we want new people to be able to live here. Something that this is, so quick sidebar, something that I'm studying, I'm not able to talk about in detail yet, but is something I'm studying or working to study is, actually I can share the preliminary result, an example, is exclusion. How exclusive are cities to people? Because oftentimes we think about people being displaced, pushed out of the current city. But I propose that we look at how welcoming or how able are people to move into the city in question. In this case, I was studying it through the lens of race, because that's part of the state requirement for the comprehensive plan, is a racially disparate impacts analysis. And so far, that's really focused on people that live there now. Now, the problem with that is, to pick on someone that none of your viewership probably lives here, is in Mercer Island. Mercer Island is a very, very low displacement risk city. Let's think about that, because all the people that could have been displaced from Mercer Island were displaced a long time ago and aren't there anymore. So no one's really at risk of being displaced from Mercer Island. However, through changing that around, how exclusive is Mercer Island? It's one of the most exclusive places in Washington State. And so let's take that a little further and say, it's exclusive through price. So how much does the median Black household make in Snohomish County? How much does the average Native American household make? How much does the median Hawaiian Pacific Islander household make? I did this in Linwood, not just because they kind of are a stand-in for Snohomish County. They tend to track the county median really closely. If you want a barometer of Snohomish County in a city, it's Linwood. 30% of white householders in Snohomish County cannot afford rent in Linwood. 30% of Snohomish County's white households cannot afford to rent in Linwood before they pay an undue amount of their monthly income to rent. That number goes to 51% when we talk about Black households. Half of Snohomish County's Black households, of which there are many, many fewer in Snohomish County, but nevertheless, 50% of them are unable to rent in the city of Linwood. When we talk about home ownership in Linwood, that goes to 90% of Black households are unable to buy in the city of Linwood. Now, white households are about 82%. So, it's still bad, but it's worse based on race. Now, as we talk about, so that was my way of introducing the idea of we want new people to be able to live here. So we can look at where would those people come from? What do the homes cost? How much money do they likely have? How much money do they make? which is really your, you know, your key to accessing a city is how much money do you make. So let's see, I think I kind of lost the thread on the question, but
Well,
go ahead.
can I pick it up?
Yeah, sure.
Because I was just talking to a really cool home loans guy, like in mortgage. We were talking about a particular client and going over the pros and cons of buying now versus next year. And a lot of people say, well, when the interest rates drop next year, which they will, then I'll be ready to buy. But then prices are going to go up. Everyone's going to come out of the woodwork and want to buy all at the same time. And he had this very like access to city living, you know, like, well, I just tell people that if they want it, they're going to be priced out of this market season. And this is I hear this a lot in the real estate world, like they're going to be priced out of this season of affordability, and then the season is going to change and they will be priced out of the market. So they'll have to wait for the next season when all of the variables are right for them. And I was just like, you know what? Do you have a better solution than that? Because like it's not everyone's it's not just about, oh, well, eventually I'll just have to quit this job and go back to school, and then I'll make 6 figures and then I'll be able to afford a house. It's like, that's not a good pathway for a lot of people, but that is what we're
No.
and if I wanted to afford Linwood, I would have to, you know, go make millions in my real estate career, and then if I'm lucky, be able
Up
to
to it.
you know, and that's not a sustainable pathway for so many people. And
It is not.
Why?
So here's the thing, what I'll say about that. Every city wants a grocery store. Whether or not they have one is a different question. Every city wants a grocery store. They want a coffee shop. They want a bookstore. They want all of those things, all of those shops that make downtown Snohomish so vibrant and so nice to live in. But our lack of variety of housing, again, so setting aside the tax impacts and all of that stuff, our lack of variety of housing means that our workforce doesn't live in town anymore. And to your the colleague of yours who mentioned, you know, just wait for a season, the income progression for a grocery store clerk or barista is never going to be such that they're able to live in a place like the city of Snohomish. There's a reason that only 7.5% of the city of Snohomish's workforce also lives in the city. 7.5% of Snohomish's workforce lives in town. The rest drive in from somewhere else. And if you've been to Snohomish, you know that it's a little spot of city in a sea of agricultural fields. There is nowhere to live just on the outskirts of town. People are driving from far. And there's a lot more ways that we can look at that. You know, how long do they take to get there? Most of them take over probably 15, 20 minutes each way. Over 1,000 of them more take more than 30 minutes. How long do they drive? What mode of transit do they use to get there? They're all driving single occupancy vehicles because there's no bus service in Snohomish, not a beacon of multimodal transit. And so the point that I'm on here is we need that variety of housing, because those occupations that make our city so vibrant, that we appreciate, that, you know, current residents enjoy, can't live anywhere close to where they live. And so that variety of housing really is an opportunity to bring your workforce there. Now, this is, people might say at this point, aha, but you were talking about dentists and doctors and things like that. You know, as the people that we're going to bring here, the workforce is still out of the question. It's like, yes, that's true. Now your workforce can live closer. Now some of your workforce might be able to make it to be able to live closer to where they work, and participate in that society and in that vibrancy rather of the community. And to say that, well, you just have to wait. You know, the people that you're talking to that can, one, reasonably wait, and two, can even consider affording a house is so increasingly narrow. You know, I would really wonder, I'd like to have a conversation with this guy about, you know, who is it that he's talking to? You know, what is their life story like? What do they look like as a household? What do their financials look like? Because I can tell you, over 900,000 fully employed people in the Central Puget Sound region, Snohomish, King, Pierce County, work in a job where in the middle of the career, the median income they'll make is less than $53,000 a year. That your mid-career income is going to be less than $53,000. You know, go ahead and go back to school, come out with student loans, come out with debt, come out with all of that, and then try to buy a house. after you've gotten a job that affords you six figures, the median required income to purchase a house in Snohomish County, a single family house, is $162,000. Assuming you put 10% down with real interest rates and real property taxes and all of that stuff, and a 33% debt to income ratio, so which is where banks are kind of at right now, but that might vary based on your financial strength. Assuming that's all true, that's what you've got. You need $160,000, $162,000 a year of household income to afford a place to live. So unless you're going to marry someone who also makes six figures, you're out of luck. I don't care how hard you work in school, because there's a vanishingly small number of occupations where that wage is actually true, that is actually feasible, attainable. So it's, the idea of like, well, just wait, you're talking to a very, very narrow slice of society.
I think real estate professionals do talk to a narrow slice of society, and not all of them, and I need to be careful because I am a real estate professional, but so but that's kind of my interest in this. It's like, well, there's traditional real estate, there's this that has a specific pathway, and I loved this conversation with this lender. Like, I love just all these, especially ones that have been in this industry in this area for a long time, because I'm like, what have you seen? Like, tell me the patterns that you've tracked over the decades that I haven't even been here, to observe, which is kind of maybe segueing into the relationship of, or maybe it's like Washington or Western Washington and the culture here versus the situation of housing across the country, because Seattle is just big money. It's big money, it's new money, and there's something in the air that, like, oh, you can just make more money. And that housing is so dependent on that high price point. To me, it's like, well, how is that even getting us closer to a more humane housing situation? Like, because if we do just pass, what am I trying to say? It's like, I'm safe, I have lots of money, just pass the buck on to the next city. I have
Pull the ladder up behind yourself.
Yeah, and like, I think there's something. Do you have anything to say over like maybe the state of housing in Washington versus other parts of the country? Or like if it's culturally, if it's the same story of like, is the asking for higher money actually going to get us the type of housing we want, or is it just this cycle? Because I remember my very first job when minimum wage, I mean, I worked in Bates City, Missouri, like 200 people, like tiny town, and everyone wanted $15 minimum wage. And I remember listening to my boss talk about the numbers, and he was like, we couldn't, like, I didn't make that. That seems like buku money to me. And now that I'm in Western Washington, I'm like, 15, I didn't work for $15,
Yeah.
So what is that? What is that like?
Yeah. So before I get to that, you mentioned who are real estate, who are we talking about in real estate brokers? I just looked up Central Puget Sound region real estate sales agents. There's 33,630 of them in 2022. The average wage for your real estate sales agents is $72,650 a year. That's the average wage for that profession. We're talking about building housing for our realtors, if nobody else. So I hope the real estate community also recognizes that this is for them too.
Totally.
We're welcome, everybody.
Yeah.
So
I will say, just before you get into it, that most of the real estate people that I meet, and investors included, are like in this because they have big hearts and they care so much. And that's one thing that like pushes me to just keep going, because I'm like, well, we're gonna find it. We're gonna find it,
Yeah. It's oh boy, when you show those like $2 million homes, you're like, I'm not never gonna live here for a second. How many square feet? Only 1,400 square feet. Wow, that's an awful big price for 1,400 square feet. So let's see, wages, money, new money, just make more money. One thing I was touching on this, the vibrancy of society that we all appreciate, coffee shops, bookstores, so on and so forth, relies on there being housing for everybody. Because you don't do those jobs. You don't have three jobs, one at Starbucks, one at the bookstore, and one at Amazon. You rely on other people to do those jobs. And so those people are leaving. And so is your quality of life is picking up and leaving. So, we're kind of at risk of killing the goose that laid the golden egg here if we just say, I got mine, screw all the rest of you. Because what made yours is everybody's contribution
Hmm.
to what makes the region a beautiful place, aside from its natural beauty. Let's see, what else should I say about that? I had a great thought and I lost it. Sorry, brain fart.
That's great. The cycle of if our wages just go up, then that'll bring
Oh
up
yeah.
housing.
So just increase wages. So that's I think related to the question you were asking. Thanks for the prompt. You know, do we just need to goose wages, you know, juice the minimum wage? Will that solve it? No, I don't think so. Right now, we are experiencing an acute housing scarcity, an acute housing shortage. And raising wages just decides who gets to win, who gets to lose. Case in point, there's two anecdotes that I have to share. Who listening has ever been stuck in a 3-hour wait for a ferry because they're on one boat service and it's, you know, summer or rush hour rush and it's hot and you've got a 4-year-old in the back seat and they're really pissed off because they're bored. I have. And so after this experience, one of many, I decided to look up what the average wage is for state ferry deckhands. The starting wage, just I want to work for the state ferries. How much do I make? $40,000 a year is the starting salary. Crew shortage? Gosh, I wonder why. Now let's say, well, of course, what state ferries just needs to do is pay their deckhands more to attract more people to the profession. But that just means that the ferry workers win and somebody else loses because now they have more money to compete for a scarce resource. You know, it's like a game of musical chairs, and the less money you have, the more hobbled you are in getting to that last remaining chair. Instead, we just need to add more chairs. You know, we can keep raising wages, but until we address the other side that we just don't have enough homes for people, that's going to be a never-ending cycle. And there's definitely a time and a place to have a discussion for increasing wages. Don't get me wrong. But in the current environment, when according to the Puget Sound Regional Council, this is like 2-3 years ago, that we're 50,000 units behind in the central Puget Sound region, no amount of wage increase is really going to make a dent. You know, and also when we talk about that 900,000 number, 900,000 people working in a job where their median wage is below $53,000 a year, you know, raising all of their wages just means that they can all, you know, knife fight with each other that much harder for the existing scarce resource. That sounds, you know, I never watched the movies, I never read the books, but I kind of think that sounds like the Hunger Games, doesn't it? And it's like, here's more knives and guns to kill each other with. Go nuts. You know, that's just not the way to make things work. We just need more places for people to be, and we need more variety. Not everybody needs a 2,800 square foot house. I defer to the realtors to talk about the actual median size of the you know, what's normal for a selling house these days. But I bet it's not a starter house.
I mean,
You know,
yeah.
go ahead.
Just hearing, I heard the statistics recently of the average square foot of housing, you know, going decade by decade, how it's just gone up so much. And maybe that's kind of tied to this like decadent culture.
Yes,
And hearing
that's the other thing.
that baristas are that essential working class because we can't live through a pandemic without our, you know, luxurious coffee.
God forbid.
And I feel that I work part-time at I don't know, this is totally, it feels somewhat relevant, but I like storytelling. So I work at this farm to table restaurant in Duval called The Grange. And I get this sense from I love it. I love the people, I love the food, but I get this sense of when we are short-staffed, the lack of empathy, because like, and then COVID just isn't an excuse anymore. Like the fact that, you know, all the systems broke and they had to be rebuilt, and staffing and all of it is just this thing that takes years to rebuild, and it made it through, but there's still this gap of like actually that was so
just fix it, just get enough people.
hard. Yeah, it's like we can't just go buy more people to do the things, and it's like we don't have places. Just it's hard enough to that.
Yeah.
Like goes back to this.
So I mean, and tell people, if people ever get in your face and be like, well, just hire more people. Why do you have? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, do you want to pay more for your meal so that we can attract more people to the business? It's like, well, no. Exactly. Case in point, that's reflected in the tax conversation we had a little while ago. It's reflected in everything. The cost of living drives so much. And if we feel a breakdown in service, Providence, I just saw on the news just before we started this conversation that the Providence nurses at Providence are going on strike. They just filed a 10-day notice that they're going on strike because we can't attract nurses. When my wife was in labor with my second child, I pulled the labor and delivery nurse out of the room in a quiet moment and said, "Hey, I need to ask you about housing. Where do most of the nurses come from?" It's like, well, they come from Lake Stevens or further north. And it's like, so what happens when it snows? Don't have a baby, she said. Like, huh? And then my wife was in the room screaming, like, what the hell are you doing out there? Get back! Stop asking your questions about housing. Get in here. True story. I told her she didn't actually know what I was doing, but I told her after the fact, and she just about ripped my head off because I do this all the time. It's like, hey, so how is housing impacting your job? And I just ask this question whenever someone's unlucky enough to talk to me. It's nurses. It's at Providence. It's my personal experience with a nurse. Asking her this question. Ask your teacher. Ask your wait staff. Ask the cooks. Why is service stressed? It's a huge stressor, and also ask the proprietor, the owner of the restaurant, how hard is it to keep good staff? Really hard, because everyone's looking to make more money. And something I wanted to mention is, the kind of the culture of housing is people are looking at housing as an investment opportunity now because it's so scarce and it's so valuable. It just makes more money. The price just keeps going up. So you could reasonably worry that that's a bubble. It's a speculatively driven bubble of housing, that people are speculating of the price above its real value. That was the case, and I can show this, that it was the case in 2006 and 7, where relative to new household creation, we had way, way, way more units going up in Snohomish County alone than households that were being created in the county. We had a huge surplus of housing, and yet the price still rose. In retrospect, we know that that was speculation. There was no reason for prices to be that high, and prices came crashing back down to earth. Interestingly, during that same period, rents did not go up at all. The average change in rent after you adjust for inflation between 2000 and 2013 is 0. There was no average change, and that line is very flat. Like maybe up 1% one year, down 2% the next year, and so on and so forth. Rent was not rising because if people couldn't swing it in the housing market, they just went to rent instead. And there was adequate rental housing available. Now rents have risen by over 70% after you adjust for inflation from 2013 to 2022. Rent goes up by 70%. Now something very, very different is happening. And people are still behaving in that same way of housing makes me money. I want to be a landlord. Some people say that I want to be a landlord. I want to buy a second house. I want to, invest. But also we have something else happening, which is both the housing makes me money, but for a lot of our workforce, a lot of people, a lot of the residents in Washington State, they just need a house because they need a roof over their head. It's a very privileged and entitled idea to say, well, everyone's just out to make a buck. To discount this whole issue as well, it's just people trying to make money off of each other. It's part of it, but also we just have a lot of people that need a place to live. That 900,000 person count that I keep coming back to, they're not buying a second house. They're even renting. They just need a place to live because there's economic opportunity in Washington State relative to the rest of the country. The overall trend of urbanization in America, in the world, collecting people in urban centers because that's where activity happens. That's where the economy is now. That's where opportunity is a true thing. And I don't think that the tide's really going to go out on that anytime soon. So you have people taking advantage of it. but you also have people that are kind of the victims of that. And that's something I do say those words, take advantage and victim, on purpose, because when your price goes up, when the price of a home goes up, when the price of rent goes up, that means that you're competing with other people for that good, right? So your home value going up means that you can get away with that price. Good for you, but it means that someone else is going to have to pay that price someday. An increasingly small number of people are going to be able to pay that. And so we need to think about, as the price goes up, don't just look at it with dollar signs replacing your pupils and go, oh boy, I made a whole bunch of money. That's a reflection of something unhealthy happening when prices are going up that much. The prices have gone up by over 120% countywide after you adjust for inflation, in the last 20 years. That's not right. That's very aberrant. And so, there's a lot to say about that, but the point that I'd make is that, housing is just a way to make money. We should not look at that way. Because look, when housing is making you money, it means that someone else is losing. It's kind of increasing that inequality in society. It's a representation of that growing inequality in society. And I'm not saying that we should all, everyone that owns a house should lose all their money and lose a shirt off their back, but surely there's a more equitable, a more socially responsible way to go about this. That you can still, we're not making more land. That's always going to be a valuable resource to have. But surely there's a more socially responsible way to do this.
Yeah, surely. I mean, it seems like the very people who inhabit the land are the people who are punished the most. And that good conversation I mentioned with that lender, something he mentioned, that could and should maybe happen is that, corporations and hedge funds being now like this biggest purchaser of single family homes, they're the ones setting the market rate. And they are the ones who are creating all these rental markets, which now it's interesting you say that about rent. I didn't realize that it stayed so low for so long and now it's gone up, because it's this whole extra market bubble. It's this whole extra asset to bet and trade on, is the market, the rental market. And
it's unhealthy. It's very unhealthy.
Yes, and it's terrifying that like the people, and seeing it decade by decade is very interesting, because I have also been wondering, like, what are the parallels that are happening now in the market and what led up to 08. And I mentioned the word decadence is just kind of ringing in my head of because I came from rural Missouri, man, and now I'm living outside of Seattle, and and
what the hell am I doing here?
What
oh my
the
God.
hell, and I get that, and I don't want to sound, I don't want to become this thing that I'm like scared of by saying this, but like that sense that I get from the people that I serve when they are unhappy with their prime level of service that they are used to, because they pay good money, they make good money, they pay good money everywhere they go. And then I'm confronted with this attitude of like, you're not enough. And I'm like, the struggle of most of the people I know and most of the people I come in contact with is not that struggle. And so I'm trying to figure out what are the patterns that this is happening everywhere. I agree that people rushing to where the money is in the urban cities, like that's not going to change anytime soon. But there is this like, there are many bubbles going on, but one that I really see here is like this thing that's happening that is affecting thousands and thousands of people, like is not affecting a certain class of people. And tech, tech money is an interesting thing. I mean, that's a lot of lenders tell me that like the average income around here is actually pretty skewed because of tech incomes. And that has only happened somewhat soon. Did I hear recently Amazon is leaving Seattle too? Or like maybe just, I don't know.
I don't think so. I think they're requiring people to come back to work and everyone's all pissed off about it, but
sure.
It's like, get back to work, you slaves. So that's the one thing I'll just interject is I don't think this circumstance that we have is not going to change until either one of two things happens. Either we increase our housing stock significantly, or Amazon and Microsoft pick up stakes and leave the Pacific Northwest. Which do we really want to have happen? I hear tell of the Boeing bust in the 70s. Coincidentally, that's the same year that the Housing Authority was started, as 1971, when the economic tide went out on the region. And people don't talk about that time favorably. You know, that was very bad. So, you know, we have an opportunity to uh, to spread the wealth around a little bit. As you know, a lot of people got to, you know, the tech money and, you know, kind of the 2 or 3 orders down on the pay scale got to take advantage of that first. Good for you. Okay, now let's open it up to everybody else, right? Let's start sharing the wealth a little bit. And the alternative is that the region basically collapses under its own weight. You know, San Francisco is an example of, you know, that happening, where it's still an okay place to live, it's still a desirable place to live, but you see a lot of people leaving California for Washington State. And a lot of people complaining about, San Francisco sucks. You know, it's there's a downside, and you know, we need to recognize that. So anyway, maybe that's a separate conversation. One other thing I wanted to say, though, just kind of on the societal sickness, you know, and kind of back to why cities aren't taking very much advantage of this, or why cities aren't doing more, is, you know, I've heard people unkindly describe cities as a country club with a zoning map. But people really show up when there's a rumor in the air that something will affect their property values. And people really show up to council meetings and really use that as a cudgel to beat the council over the head with and say, don't you dare do anything that will affect my property value. And that kind of gets back to people viewing housing as an investment vehicle. Less about shelter, more about investment in personal wealth building.
Yeah.
You know, when people have that mindset and they show up out of the woodwork and they're well-moneyed and, you know, very vocal, well-connected, and they show up to council and say, don't you dare, that might start to get to why cities aren't doing very much, because the people that are currently there are the ones that are working to enforce the status quo, at the exclusion of people that don't live there now, don't live there yet, and can't vote and can't really show up and complain and say, I can't live here. It's like, well, where do you live? You know, Oregon? Like, well, I don't care where your opinion. You're from Oregon. You're not from here. Get out. You know, so cities are becoming very insular, as, you know, with that mindset of people trying to build wealth. And that's a real challenge. And I would encourage, you know, my whole spiel today and in my whole work is to talk to homeowners and say, look, this is something that you really need to change your mind on, for a long laundry list of reasons. Taxes, the workforce that you benefit from, your kids is the one that I haven't mentioned yet. Where are your kids going to live? You know, I'm stably housed. I'm fine. I don't care. Protect my property values, city council, make them go up. I don't care why they go up. Just make it go up, because that's not a non-liquid asset that I'm sitting on. I'm going to cash out someday. To hell with the community that I allegedly care so much about. I'm going to cash out and go live in a freaking mansion in Missouri. You know,
That's what's happening. I mean, like, there,
yes,
it's
yes, it is.
I have, you know, a family member in Lending in Missouri, and I used to work at a bank in Missouri, and my parents are landowners, and like the amount of California money, the amount of West Coast money coming and flooding those rural areas, the Missourians cannot outbid them. And so those children's children can no longer afford their home, their hometown.
Serve us indentured peasants. You know, so that's my recall back to, you know, the median move-in year for owners is 2011. Like, people don't care about community. They just care about building up the value of their asset until they're ready to cash out. So if they're willing to leave the state, if you're trying to cash out and like move inside your own community, you're screwed. But so setting that aside, unless you're going to hand that home off to your kids, where are your kids going to live? Unless you're going to like take out a second mortgage or another mortgage after you paid off your house and dump all that money into your kids, help them buy a house, where are they going to live? Right? Because they're going to start at the beginning of the pay scale. You know, they're going to work as you just need to bootstraps and grocery store clerk and just work hard like I did. Well, I hate to break it to you, but grocery store clerks make about $30,000 a year. So, you know, where are they going to live? Grandma and Grandpa Boomer. Sorry, that's classes of me, ages of me. You know, where are they going to go And this is back to, if you're stably housed and you don't care, if you care about your kids, which might be asking a lot for some people. I have heard a current mayor say, I don't care about my kids. If they can't hack it, they can go live somewhere else, which is like, wow. Okay, assuming you're an aberration. If most parents care about where their children can live, this is an issue that's going to get you. It's gonna find you. If you are expecting children, it's gonna get you, because we've lost over 3,000 childcare workers in the Central Puget Sound region in the last 3 years. We used to have about 4,100 childcare workers. Now we have about 1,900.
Wow.
Sorry, so that's more like 2,000. 2,200 childcare workers have left the profession. It's gonna find you. It's like, I can't find a place to put my kids in daycare, so I can go, both of us can go make our 6 figures so that we can afford a place to live. Why not? Oh, because all the childcare workers quit. All the teachers quit. All the ferry workers quit. This is an issue that's going to get you. And so to the people that are stably housed, you're still part of a society. You're not an island, right? You still rely on other people to do things that you need. And the get it all, leave none for anybody else mindset is really destructive. And actually, I would say it's so destructive, and also it's a tremendous missed opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the benefits that we have that we can realize if we had more variety in housing, setting aside tax benefits, which I already covered, and the social benefits of living next to Judge Smith. If your kids can hang out with Judge Smith's kids, like, great, kids might become a lawyer or a judge or something like that. Think about people not having to drive 2 hours to get to work, 2 hours commuting each way, and the benefits of spending time with their kids. We just need more, traditional family values. Like, yes, we do. It'd be great to impart those traditional family values to children if I was not on the road for 2 hours every day and working 2 jobs, so I wasn't even home on the weekend either.
Or if people can afford to have kids. I mean, I think I hear more
Or people could afford
that people just aren't choosing to do it because of the
Yes.
cost burden. And it's like, that is,
Uh-huh.
I want to get into this. This.
Button.
Okay, let's get into this.
Let's get into it. Sarah and Chris, get into it. We're gonna fight. You've
Let's do
waited
it.
this long. Fight.
Because I so easily can be like you just said, it will find you. Like, this issue will affect everybody. This is all connected. And that's one of like the threads of my life, is that everything is connected.
And you're right.
And I also want to talk about like the huge benefits that we're missing out on, because I think that's one of the things that drives me in the housing world, is like this way of life that so many people yearn for and long for. Like it's like a memory that they're trying to remember, and they can't find it anywhere. I can't find
Doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist in our modern society. Like the way that cities are set up, and the way that the in-city limit people versus the out-of-city limit people. This isn't even a left or right political thing in some ways. And
it isn't. It shouldn't be anyway.
It's the humanity. I think that's where I'm getting to, like, with this whole like thing I'm coming at this with, is like something has been stripped away, and our ability to afford shelter is a huge part of it. And at the same time, I don't want to take away the reality that, like, when someone saves for 10 years and they invest all of their savings into land that they buy, why shouldn't it be something of an investment? So, like, is there a way to come at like the investment vehicle or generational wealth or something, and we get back to like this more humane way of living? Do those?
Sure. So this is all of those things, and it's also bridging the political divide, which for a non-political issue. If I tell you, if you live in the city of wherever, let's say, Seattle, actually the lots are too small. Let's say you live in Linwood, where the average lot size is 7,200 square feet, 7,200 to 9,600 square feet, Linwood or Mount Lake Terrace. And I tell you, hey, you can now put 2 units on your property instead of 1. What I just did as a city is I just handed you a great big bag of money, unrealized value in your land. Because as I talked about earlier with, take one structure and replace it with 2, and the 2 much higher improvement values, that is money that you will realize as the seller, as the landowner. So if we're looking to really solve this, I really do think it's saying, hey, we can now put more units on parcels, because not only do the current landowners make out like bandits. I mean, when you want to cash out, and they are, and it's not a compulsion to leave, it's when you want to, and your house is redeveloped into, at a time that makes fiscal sense for the builder, the end product will eventually be much more affordable, relatively speaking. Not right out of the gate. It will be more affordable. You, the landowner, will make out like a bandit, and other people of lower incomes, still high, but lower incomes, will be able to buy into your community and will realize all of those social benefits. And hey, now we have childcare workers, and now you can have kids, because you don't feel so financially stressed. You're working all the time, and you just don't have time. I mean, I hate to kind of reduce it down to just allow us to build more housing, but when 80% of our acreage in cities, so I buried the lead. I looked at every single land use element from the comprehensive plans of every single city from 2015. I counted up all of the acres. I looked at every single zoning designation and what it could be used for. 80% of land that is zoned for a residential purpose, that can allow a residential use, that only allowable residential use is a single family home. It's 1 unit across all of the cities. That's from Granite Falls down to Edmonds. Opening some of that up and allowing more units to go there really is handing a huge financial win to the current owners, and it's handing a win to society in a plethora of ways. Pick your benefit. It's there. It's not fast, it's not immediate, but it's there. And really, I go back to, why are we having so much trouble with this? Like, why is this so hard when it's right there? And really, it comes down to people just being like, well, but I really like my neighborhood. I really like but not recognizing that what they say is they just like the wooden nails that put the homes together, and that's all that they're preserving. One thing I said, I'd talk politics about this. That's a very saying you can do more with your land is a very libertarian argument. It's a very free market argument. And so this is something that really should actually, the idea that we should roll back or make zoning more permissive is a very libertarian conservative argument, traditional conservative argument, because that's, you bought the land. Why is the government telling you what you can and cannot do with it? And right now, the government zoning designation prohibits you from realizing the full value of that land when we're existing in a period of such great scarcity. The government's holding you back, man. You would be sitting on that much more money if you could put 2 units on your parcel instead of 1.
And is there any weight to, like, maybe the more liberal argument that, like, well, we need to preserve the wild and we can't sprawl out too much because something has to.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen bumper stickers that say, like, keep humans out of the forest, and I'm like, we thrive in forests and waterways, and like, we're a species that belong. We can be caretakers, but I think that's a huge thing that's being separated by the housing industry is our ability to steward the land, without the disconnection.
So take the existing footprint of a house, a modern, house somewhere in Snohomish County. It's about 2,800 square feet, 24 to 2,800. Can you divide that footprint of a house into 2 without changing the actual footprint of the house? If yes, this proposal has absolutely 0 environmental impact. And it's an environmental benefit because, more than likely people will be driving less distance to get to work or to access amenities. What we're saying here is not sacrifice the environment for housing. We're saying um, housing saves the environment. Because until we can, just completely stop, eliminate the human race, we're going to keep impacting the environment. Not advocating for the elimination of the human race. So while we're at it, why don't we put people where the land has already been impacted and keep people out of natural areas, reduce that pressure on our natural areas, even agricultural land. Hardly a natural area, many would contend, but it does produce a lot of food, which is nice.
And the
Does
amount of
produce a lot of
housing,
local food. Yeah.
right? And the amount of housing that can be built. I mean, I've read like King County's amount of local food has gone down since they made this whole initiative to like grow more local food. They actually have gone down in what's consumed
I
locally.
totally believe that.
And and it's like people's imaginations can't allow them to see that houses can be made without a bunch of concrete, or like they can be made smaller,
Really?
and like the caretakers
No way.
close to the people they care about. Like teachers, I have this vision for like teachers and mentors, and like why are we paying so much in young child care, like young child care, like the dollars amount that go into that, and like how couldn't it be like wouldn't it for our own human development be great if it was close to home and family and their village and the people they saw, and like wouldn't they walk there?
Wouldn't that be crazy? Wouldn't that be neat to be able to walk to groceries instead of having to drive so
Yeah,
freaking far to get groceries?
and it seems illegal to put such houses up, and it is, right? I mean, it's why is there a way? I remember once you in our first conversation you told me like just start a coalition, and I'm like and I've pondered this so much, and I'm actually working with a builder now. I'm like, okay, we're gonna just do more skills. We're just gonna offer skills to people, and try to teach people more building skills so that they could build their own units. Because you need like one engineer, but you need more help. You need more hands, and if people have the skills to do that, do you see it like that
If the city allows you to do it, and that's the killer, is right now is the cities, that boy howdy. Just wait until just wait until you get to that permitting desk at City Hall and you just go, oh my God, what am I doing? And you just throw everything that you've created in the bin. You're just like, F it. I don't want to do this anymore. It's a nightmare, where your utility meters and parking spaces, Mukilteo, I looked at accessory dwelling unit codes, and this is a couple years old, so they might have changed since then, but accessory dwelling units is you need like 2 extra parking spaces for every accessory dwelling unit. Like what? You have to have, you have to have 2 extra parking spaces per ADU, attached or detached, doesn't matter. It can't be on grass. It can't be tandem parking. It has to be side by side. It's just like all of this stuff. And it's like, I just want to build another unit on my land. The city says no. Libertarians should be going, what? You can't do that. You can't tell people not to do that. Not only because it's, immoral from the libertarian perspective, but it's destroying our ability to provide enough housing for people that need it. And they're right. So this is a very cross the aisle issue. And, there's a very big reason for all folks of conservative stripes to care about this, more the personal liberties approach and financial perspective. And from the more progressive Democratic side, it's, a benefit to society. It's a place for your teachers to live. It's a place for everybody that you rely on to live. It's a racial equity thing. As I talked about, 90% of Black households can't afford the median house price in Linwood. Discrimination much. So on. Like, there's a reason for everybody to like this. It's really actually a funny issue how housing, the opposition to housing, also turns everything on its head. Some of the most ardent liberal bastions in the country, not just Washington State, are aggressively anti-housing change. San Francisco, let's not pick just on Washington State. San Francisco, still working on it. Very, very liberal, very, very progressive, very, very single family house. Housing is a fascinating issue that really defies traditional political boundaries as we see them. But there's a reason to reach across the aisle for both parties. and to form a really interesting coalition. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's something that meets the needs of both political, mainstream political ideologies of, personal liberties and freedom and human growth and development in a way that makes some freaking sense. It continues to baffle me. And I've said this once before, but the only thing that we're saving is the wood and nails that forms the structure. We're not saving the people inside them. We're not saving or benefiting the environment. We're not saving or benefiting society at large. We're only preserving the wood and nails that we get to look at on the off chance we ever go outside. How many people really go for a long walk in their neighborhood? No, they mostly just drive through on the way to get groceries, on the way to somewhere else, on the way to work. It I keep asking it as an open question, but really there's an answer. It's a rhetorical question. This is stupid. This is really dumb. This is a tremendously damaging way of behavior that we're just enforcing because no one can really get their hands around the issue and just say all this in one go in a way that gets past people's fears and objections and rejections because they want their property value to be more, not less, their assets value to be more, not less. And cities don't have the staff. They aren't really equipped to even have that thought. Again, the city is designed to serve the people that currently live there, the current constituency. And so you've got this self-reinforcing echo chamber of, we don't want change. So the city says we don't want change. And so nothing changes. And so we want less change, and it's on and on. And we've really got to get something to break that open. Not because I might be describing myself. Not because we're trying to take, but because we're trying to realize a great benefit. There's tremendous opportunity just over the hill. Just listen and think about this for a little while, and let's then take some action, and we'll realize a lot of benefits that we've really covered extensively here. Not the least of which is having kids. Kids suck. Kids are awful. I've slept no more than 2 hours straight for the last 6 months after my second's been born, except when I dumped him with my parents and said, okay, I'm going to go sleep for 8 hours in the middle of the day. Kids are hard, kids are awful, and it takes a village. When there's no one to help you because everyone is so damn busy that there's no slack, no kidding, people are going to stop having kids.
Yeah.
There's a reason to not have kids. I was convinced until my wife changed my mind. They're like, nope, no kids for me. No kids for me. They're gross. They're yucky, and they're really noisy. And all of those things are incredibly true. They're also kind of cute. But there's a reason to not have kids that doesn't have anything to do with housing. But more and more, I can definitely see how people would say, no, I'm not going to do that because I just don't have the time. And I don't have the support network. I've moved from rural Missouri to the middle of, outrageously expensive Washington State. I have no support. I don't have family who are free, and I can't pay anyone because I can't pay enough because their cost of living is so outrageously high. It's breaking down. Like, the whole system is coming apart at the seams. At every linkage, the whole thing is coming apart. And I really do believe that to be true. In very sincere terms, that the whole system is starting to come apart, that all of these stressors really come back to the fact that we just don't have the slack in our daily lives. No matter what you do, we don't have the slack time, which is very valuable to reach higher order thinking. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization, self-realization, all of those things that I can't quote accurately right now. We don't have the time to realize those things. And that comes down to things that shows up in things like family creation, having children.
Yeah.
Your optimism, your hope for the future. If you have none, it's like, well, fuck this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that.
I knew.
Sorry.
No, I knew I wanted to talk to you about this because it's exactly right. I love that we've linked birth rates, human creativity, like the incessant, like the absurdity of like regular people working 3 and 4 jobs. Like, I work at least 3, and like the sustainability that I feel within myself that like most of the people I talk to nowadays is like, we're fed up. This is insane. This is crazy. And like mentioning, going back to like the need for people to have the skills to build their own homes and housing. Like right now there's a nonprofit that does it for family, like a group of families can build their housing together. I think it's Housing Hope, but I might have like all the requirements off, but they need to essentially not have any housing currently in order to qualify for this program. So it's like how the sustainability of like even the gaps that are missing within that field of like, I understand and appreciate that people somewhere are allowed to go in together and build their own housing. But like everyday people can't seem to, like the average median.
And the city doesn't, our current municipal setup doesn't support that either. It just doesn't say, it doesn't make it easy. You know, just imagine trying to do that through the lens of city permitting and code review and all of those things. It just it's hard in an already hard system.
So
And
people need to go outside of city limits. I mean, where else do we go to get these permits?
you can't get out of the municipal or the permitting process. You need to change the process. You know, don't run, fight. You know, it's if we're run, fight, hide. Don't run, fight, and don't hide because they're going to find you. I hate that I have to say that now that I've heard that from school because I have a kindergartner now and I don't like that I have to know that anymore, but that's a separate conversation. You know, this is you can't move because the issue is ubiquitous nationwide. You know, it's a different story across the country, but stay and use your voice. That's all it takes.
And it, you know, that's such good advice because it is affecting the entire middle class. Like it's on my website now, make the middle class legal again. I heard that in a city council meeting. And it really is, it is affecting like the people who inhabit the in-between. It's the people who aren't, you know, maybe don't qualify for this one type of housing program where they can get, you know, free housing as long as they build it. And granted, it's, you know, but where are all the people who are willing to pay a decent amount for something and, you know, invest in community there and try to repair culture that way. I think that's a huge
something I wanted to mention about hedge funds and investment vehicles is, you know, that's this is a bit of a callback to a previous part of the conversation, but that's a very short-sighted way for them to be operating, saying like, we're just going to buy up all the homes and charge people exorbitant rates. Why are people buying goods and services anymore? Gosh, I wonder why. Oh, it's because they have no disposable income whatsoever. A healthy economy that is full of opportunity for the middle class, as well as the investment brokers, hedge fund managers, and everybody else, all of that works a lot better when you have a healthy middle class. You know, when you build more homes, what do you fill those homes with? Furniture, goods, washing machines, dishwashers. I bought a house and I've already had to replace the dishwasher and I'm about to replace the dryer because they're old as hell and I got to replace them. You know, that's keeping the economy moving, right? It's very short-sighted to say, nope, we're only in it for extracting rent from people to the fullest extent possible. Long-term economic stability is a strong middle class, which is not a brand new idea, I know, but it's worth saying that, you know, the elimination of the middle class really comes down to our lack of housing, I would say. And if you know, it's to the captains of industry, if we have such a thing left anymore, to say, oh yeah, we should probably think about that. We should probably encourage that because all of those people that now can own a home, now have disposable income, are going to start supporting the economy. So that's a bit of a callback, but it's, you know, it's to everybody's benefit.
Totally.
It's not just, you know, those, think of the peasants, they need a place to live too. You know, it's really to the benefit of everybody from top to bottom. So come on, people.
Do you know a place in Snohomish County that like maybe is more friendly with that kind of permitting? Because I've heard in comparison to King County that Snohomish has better, I mean, obviously more space for adding housing. But like a single family home on 5 acres that isn't allowed to build additional dwelling units, it's like, what the hell? Like, who's on the verge of changing that bullshit rule so that like people who have the space and resources can house more people?
You don't have any large lots in urban area, in city areas in Snohomish County anymore. The last real holdout is Briar, all like 2,000 people of it, with zoning size of 12,500 square feet. Good old Briar, right on the county line actually with King County, believe it or not. The most permissive places to do things in the cities is an evolving race. Everett is working on that. The planning director, the mayor, a lot of the city staff are very engaged in that. And they're trying to make strides in housing variety and opportunity in Everett. The city of Snohomish is trying to get around the course on that. I think there's, it's again back to the progressive conservative discussion. The progressive side of the city of Snohomish is very pro housing, and the conservative side is very, no, we don't really like that. So it's really speaking to the conservative side, like, hey, you guys, this is to your benefit. But Snohomish is trying to figure that out. I can't think of other city. Well, Stanwood and Arlington. Stanwood more so. Something that I find interesting, kind of if I'm trying to have, Chris's theorem of housing flexibility, is there's an inverse relationship. I'm going to try and sound as hoity-toity as I possibly can. There's an inverse relationship to the value of housing to the city's flexibility in housing and land use policy making. That is to say, the more expensive the homes are, the less flexible the city will be in land use and permitting decisions. So the further north in Snohomish County you go, usually the easier it will be to persuade, the city as an entity to be flexible. And so Snohomish County, kind of continuing that theorem, Snohomish County covering all of Snohomish County, which is by and large rural, when you look at the actual land use map of the county, no kidding, is much more permissive. So, and the reason is back to the value of people's asset. That when you start talking about changing land uses, people get all, uptight about, well, don't affect the value of my asset. And so, the presence of, when the assets cost more, Edmonds, Uncle Tio, Mercer Island, Shoreline, etc., people get really uptight about that. So the more rural places, heck, I think it's, well, I won't say that, but one city, very, very far flung, has said, man, if I thought I could get it through, just get people around the course on the benefits of all this, I would just blow up my whole zoning map. I'm a small town. We're getting crushed out here. I don't want to deal with this anymore. I just want to just blow up the zoning map. Just let people go nuts, and just free market. Not like just build towers, but free market. Let the market figure it out. Let's build what can pencil. And that's a very rural place. So anyway, that's a bit circuitous. I forget where I started. Sorry.
No, it's okay. What are the benefits of zoning? I mean, what an idea that like a city could just be like, you know what, no more of this, because seeing Hawaii, I mean, granted it was a crisis, but seeing them just get rid of all zoning or like housing rules, they're just like, nope, just build it back. We're not going to put any limitations on you. My mind hearing that is like, are we just going to get rid of these crazy rules in a state of emergency? Is that what's going to happen? Like, we're just going to wait for
Till the earthquake happens? Yep.
Emergency to like allow this? What'd you say?
Till the earthquake happens?
Yeah, or like the purge, or
Yeah, the purge. We could. I mean, that's the thing. Zoning is, so history lesson, zoning is about 1 century old. It originated in the concept of someone sent me a message. 15 minutes. Zoning originated in about 1920. There's a gentleman by the name of Edward M. Bassett. He wrote a seminal piece called Zoning, creatively named. And he describes, I mean, this is a fascinating read, where he basically talks about zoning bands. Instead of the zoning that we have now, he talks about, in his mind, 6 zones from hyper urban like downtown Manhattan to rural, far away, band 6, and all points in between, as this is what zoning should be, and kind of defining those, basically the form of the structure, and what happens inside the structure, who cares? And the goal being to separate nuisance uses from residential uses. Don't put the meat packing plant next to a single family neighborhood. Okay, I can get on board with that. I don't want to live next to a chemical refinery. But we've taken zoning so far that when you actually read Bassett's piece, and I'd be happy to email this to you. I find it fascinating. I've read this cover to cover at least 5 times. I strongly proselytize this. Zoning as Bassett imagined it actually makes a lot of sense. But what we've turned it into now, before I get to what we turned it into now, I'll explain how he imagined it. Is zoning is supposed to be flexible. It's supposed to be responsive. It's supposed to be faster moving and responsive to the needs of society for the betterment of everybody. So, and I mean, I can't capture all like 40 pages of what Bassett wrote. It's like what he wrote about what zoning is supposed to be reads today like an indictment of our current zoning code. And it's just fascinating to read this seminal piece by the gentleman described as the father of zoning. That's actually in planning, he's described as the father of zoning. Basically dunk on current zoning practices because, they're not at all what he envisioned back in 1920. So what is the purpose of zoning? At its core, it was to separate those nuisance uses away from residential land, but we've turned it into, like I've kind of been discussing and alluding to, a method of wealth creation. The concept of zoning, of separating nuisance uses apart, of making sure you don't live in your single family house next to the Empire State Building. That doesn't go up right next to your house. And we're like, what the hell is that? The purpose of zoning has been lost and perverted into something that is designed to build wealth for people and to be inflexible and preserve the buildings and the people's wealth. We've changed zoning. I mean, I don't say that zoning is a bad thing. I say that our current imagination of what zoning is bad, because I won't bore you with the list, but top of mind is inflexible, unresponsive, that people have captured the concept of land use decision making for their own personal benefit at the exclusion of the benefit of society. And all of the things that we've discussed. So really, I'm not saying that like we need to delete our zoning codes. We just need to take them out of this wrapping of barbed wire that we put them in for to kind of torture the analogy. We've got to just unbind this because we're really paying for it, whether we appreciate it or not.
Yeah.
I'm a real downer at parties.
You don't. I want to invite you to my parties for that reason.
Yeah, I wouldn't invite me.
So I know you have to get going soon, and I appreciate your time. So I'll ask this kind of last question about kind of what you were talking about. Is there an upside, or is there a way to create like a moral, like a more ethical approach to land ownership? Because right now it is only seen as this investment vehicle, and I think a lot of people are grabbing at it for that. And maybe that's contributing to the wealth gap, but
It is.
But like I kind of posited earlier, like I would think that someone who spent 10 decades maybe saving to buy their own piece of land or home, like why couldn't that be, an investment that does earn something down the road?
Your ownership of land is transitory. The land's it was there before you were alive. It's going to be there after you're gone. What you do with the land that you saved up for is your business. No one's going to tell you what to do with the land. And in fact, the solution here is to be more permissive in telling people what they can do with the land. So when the next person buys that land after you're gone for whatever reason, it's giving them the flexibility to do what they want with the land. So the concept of land ownership is something that, like, I own this land forever is very presumptive for a lot of different reasons. And, so it's sure, do whatever you want to with the land within reason. Basically, this is, if I recall correctly, this comes up in Bassett's piece. So I'm glad I mentioned that is, land ownership, you should have all the rights to do with the land that you have bought, which, I don't want to touch like the morality of being able to buy and own land, which is dicey. That's a whole separate discussion. Just the morality of owning land is weird, but saying that that's allowed for now, you can do whatever you want with it as long as it doesn't harm your neighbors. It's in the Constitution. I think it's the Fourth Amendment is the public welfare. I think is that. I might be confusing it with something else. But basically, you have personal freedoms and liberties as long as you don't infringe on the health and well-being of others or society broadly. That's also the mandate, and this is touching on a hot button issue, but was also hot back in the day after the Spanish flu, is the mandatory nature of vaccination, which is something that Bassett brings up. And he discusses in the wake of the Spanish flu, require people to get a vaccine, even if they don't want to, because it's for the social good. And that was a real thing back in the 1920s after millions died from the Spanish flu. So same thing goes with housing. You can't, dump tremendous amounts of oil into your land because it'll go into the groundwater and affect your neighbors, that whole concept. But other than that, you can basically do what you want with the land as you own it, for as long as you own it. And so why are we saying that you can only build a single family house just for you? Or why can't someone buy it and then divide it up into other pieces, other parcels? The concept of, and saying like, well, we're going to run out of land. We've solved that issue in other parts of the country and certainly other parts of the world. I think of, this is a terrible reason to think of it, but the Miami condo collapse from a couple of years ago, that condo that just fell down in Miami because no one bothered with the upkeep. People can live on a very small piece of dirt and they own an asset within the larger building, the condominium building. Maybe the condo collapse isn't really germane to bring up here, but we can figure this out. We can do that. And you say, well, I don't want to live in a condo. You don't have to. No one's saying that you have to. There are single family homes in Florida, but there is a great value in living in a condominium as well. So there is a way to do it. I'm sorry if I'm not really getting exactly to the question you were asking, but there is a way to do this. Like, we can figure this out. Come on, guys.
Airspace is real estate. I mean,
Yes,
that little cube
exactly.
that you can buy in the sky, it's a vehicle. So it's a space.
Yeah. And as we talk about environment, people will say no more housing because we need to protect the environment. Except for birds, and not to discount birds, which hit glass windows and die and all of that impact. Except for that, building higher doesn't impact the environment. It can create heat islands. It can do that, but we can mitigate against that in a variety of methods. The environmental impact of building up is a hell of a lot less than building out. I shouldn't have to say that, but I guess I do.
It's a both and world,
Yeah.
we have both approaches. So, well, thank you, Chris, for your time today.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Any final things you want to say before we stop?
I've said a lot of the academic philosophizing. So I'll just rattle off a couple statistics just really quick at the end of the show, just so that people have something crunchy to understand and contextualize this with. 90% of Black households can't purchase the house. 90% of Snohomish County Black households cannot buy a house in the city of Linwood if they don't own it already. Something we didn't talk about today is income restricted housing. Income restricted housing, all forms of housing support in Snohomish County are oversubscribed 3-to-1. For every unit or form of assistance that we have in Snohomish County, there are 3 people waiting and 1 person getting every unit of assistance. That's probably why the Housing Authority of Snohomish County closed its wait list for housing choice vouchers. They're closing it, or they closed it last month because the wait list was getting too long.
Wow.
The median price, assuming you put, as I said earlier, assuming you put 10% down on a house in Snohomish County, the cost to buy, the required income to buy in 2022 was about $162,000 a year. The reason for that price increase is because interest rates rose by about 4%, 5% in 2021, and prices did not decline. For every 2 percentage points of interest rate increase, home prices need to decline by 27% to offset it, and that is not happening. Interest rates are rising, required income is rising, and not being offset by declining home prices. Home prices have fallen in 2023 so far, but not enough to offset that. Required income to own a house, no matter what the housing product is, has never been higher in Snohomish County than it is today. The final point, what about mobile homes? Mobile homes, just buy those. A mobile home park home, so not a manufactured home on its own parcel, which is usually like an acre in size, so very, very hard to analyze. A mobile home park home used to be running about $60,000. Adjusted for inflation back in 2018, 2019, that now runs you over $140,000. A mobile home park home whose median age is 40 years old. Those homes are 40 years old. Their estimated useful life is 30 to 50 years old. So you're paying that much more for a mobile home park home. This is something that is society-wide. It is from Edmonds to Darrington. The idea that, well, you can just drive until you qualify is a bunch of crap. The median home price, and I'm going over for just a minute because I can just eat lunch faster. The median home price in Darrington used to be $100,000 back in the year 2000, adjusted for inflation. It is now over $400,000 in the town of Darrington. Darrington, if you don't know where the hell that is, look it up on a map. It's 1,500 people in the hills. It was cut off during the Oso landslide, like literally cut off from society. It's that far away. And their home price is now over $400,000. The idea of drive until you qualify is a bunch of crap. The idea of sprawl is also a bunch of crap because less and less of your workforce will actually live in town. No single city in Snohomish County except Everett has more than 10% of their workforce living in the city. If you're if environment is your priority issue, you should care about housing, period. If you care about people, you should care about housing. If you care about teachers, you should care about housing. If you care about healthcare, you should care about housing. None of these things happen without a stable home, stable housing circumstance to be a home base, a safe place to sleep at night, shelter from the elements. If you can't do that, you're not going to actualize anything else at the higher order of needs. You know, create creative thought, participation in society, donation to good causes. You're not going to care a lick about the environment if you don't have a stable place to sleep at night. Everything starts with housing. And there's nothing that says we can't. There's no immutable law of the universe that says housing can't be done. Human history is replete with examples of varied different kinds of housing. To say that the current form is the be all end all is a bunch of short-sighted BS. We can do it differently. We just choose not to. And look at what we're giving up in exchange for choosing not to. Thank you for coming to my first ever podcast. I almost said TED Talk, but that would be probably get me in trouble.
Boom. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
That rocked. Thank you so much for your time. And I agree. It is so short-sighted. It's this lack of creativity, lack of innovation, lack of knowing and reading about history or being, cultural experience. And just about mobile homes, like that being the alternative around here. This summer was showing someone in 55 plus parks. She was an elder that I was going around to show the homes in her budget. And it was over $100,000 for these old mobile homes, like you said, but they were doubling the rental rates. Like, I'm like, how's that even legal? Most of them have caps. They can only raise the least lot rent so much. And they were literally doubling them because they had probably, I'm asking my government affairs and our mutual friend, the mayor of Mount Lake Terrace, like, well, how are they doing this? And she's like, oh, they must have plans. They're like, they must have plans for the land. It's like, no, we're reaching the end of this. It's falling apart at the seams. So Thank you so much for laying it out
My pleasure.
today. And I hope we get to talk again soon.
I would love to come back. There's lots more to talk about.
Yeah, we do. Thank you.
Thank you.